The lecture hall at Galactic Academy buzzed with nervous energy as Professor Aldrich prepared his most dangerous demonstration of the semester. His pet Deathstalker stretched its 8 deadly legs and clicked its massive claws against the polished floor. The creature stood nearly 3 meters tall with obsidian black armor covering every inch of its muscular frame. Rows of razor-sharp teeth gleamed in its wide mouth, while twin tail stingers dripped with venom that could kill most galactic species within seconds. Students from 12 different worlds whispered anxiously among themselves. The blue-skinned Vraxians clicked their mandibles in fear, while the crystalline Lithos hummed low warning frequencies. Even the predatory Mantari kept their distance from the front rows. Nobody wanted to be too close when Nyx decided to demonstrate exactly why Deathstalkers ruled the apex of every known food chain across the galaxy. Today we examine the perfect killing machine, Aldrich announced, as he adjusted his ceremonial teaching robes. The fabric shimmered with protective energy fields that could theoretically stop a plasma blast, though nobody was eager to test them against Nyx's natural weapons. Notice how evolution has crafted every aspect of this magnificent beast for maximum lethality. The reinforced exoskeleton can deflect military-grade weapons, while the neural venom induces paralysis within microseconds of contact. Nyx prowled around the lecture platform with fluid grace that made hardened warriors nervous. The creature had never shown fear in its entire life. Born on the nightmare world of Keth Prime, where even the plants could strip flesh from bone, Nyx had been raised from a hatchling by Aldrich himself. The professor was one of only 3 beings in known space who could handle a fully grown Deathstalker safely. The Academy's communication system suddenly chimed with an urgent announcement that made everyone freeze. Attention all faculty and students. Emergency integration protocol is now in effect. A new species has been discovered and fast-tracked through first contact procedures. Representative will be joining ongoing classes for immediate cultural observation. All personnel maintain standard diplomatic protocols. Murmurs rippled through the lecture hall as students exchanged worried glances. Emergency integrations only happened when the Galactic Council deemed a species either extremely valuable or extremely dangerous. The fast-track process usually took months of careful preparation, but something had clearly changed those plans drastically. Heavy blast doors at the rear of the hall began cycling through their opening sequence with mechanical precision. The thick metal panels that could withstand direct asteroid impact slowly pulled apart, revealing the corridor beyond. Atmospheric processors equalized pressure and filtered air composition to accommodate whatever life form was about to enter. A figure stepped through the doorway that made absolutely no sense to anyone present. It walked upright on only 2 legs like several known species, but something about its movement seemed fundamentally different. The being appeared completely unarmored and unprotected, wearing what looked like primitive cloth coverings over its pale pink skin. No visible weapons adorned its body. No energy fields shimmered around its frame. No cybernetic enhancements gleamed in the overhead lighting. The creature stood roughly average height compared to most galactic species, with brown fur covering only the top of its head. Its limbs appeared fragile and weak compared to the muscled forms of warrior races like the Vraxians, yet it moved with surprising confidence across the lecture hall floor. "Greetings, everyone," the being said in perfectly translated galactic standard. "My name is David Chen, and I represent humanity from a world called Earth. We apologize for the sudden intrusion, but the Council felt immediate observation would benefit our integration process." Several students exchanged confused looks as David walked casually down the aisle between their seats. His voice carried none of the mechanical distortion of translator technology, suggesting his species had already mastered their language systems with remarkable speed. Professor Aldrich cleared his throat professionally, though his eyes remained fixed on their unexpected visitor. "Welcome to our academy, David. Please take any available seat and feel free to ask questions during our demonstration. Today we are studying apex predators and their role in galactic ecosystems." David smiled pleasantly and selected an empty chair in the 3rd row, directly between a nervous Vraxian student and a hulking Mantari warrior. Both aliens unconsciously shifted away from the human, though neither could explain exactly why they felt compelled to increase distance. As David settled into his seat and pulled out what appeared to be a primitive paper notebook. Something extraordinary began happening near the lecture platform. Nyx had stopped prowling and stood completely motionless with all 8 legs locked in position. The massive predator's head turned slowly toward David as its enhanced sensory organs processed new information. The Deathstalker's pupils suddenly dilated to maximum width while its breathing became rapid and shallow. Every muscle in its armored frame began trembling visibly as primal instincts flooded through its nervous system. Nyx took several hesitant steps backward until it bumped against Professor Aldrich's legs. Then the impossible happened. The most feared predator in known space deliberately positioned itself behind its handler and attempted to hide like a frightened youngling. Its massive bulk pressed against Aldrich's robes while its head remained fixed on David with obvious terror. Complete silence filled the lecture hall as hundreds of students witnessed something that contradicted everything they knew about Deathstalker behavior. These creatures feared nothing in the universe. They had been observed hunting spacecraft for sport and treating armed military units as minor irritations. Yet somehow this unassuming human had reduced Nyx to a cowering mass of terror without even acknowledging its presence. David seemed oblivious to the reaction he was causing as he arranged his notebook and prepared to take notes. His casual manner suggested he had no idea that every eye in the room was switching between watching him and staring at the trembling apex predator attempting to hide behind its handler Professor. Aldrich felt Nyx's claws digging through his protective robes as the creature sought any available comfort or security. The Professor's hands shook slightly as he realized his lifetime companion had just demonstrated submission behavior for the first time in its existence. Whatever humanity represented, it was something far beyond anything the galaxy had ever encountered before. David pulled a simple writing instrument from his pocket and began sketching detailed diagrams of Nyx while the Professor struggled to regain his composure. The human's casual interest in the supposedly terrifying predator only made the situation more surreal for everyone watching. His strokes captured the Deathstalker's anatomy with surprising accuracy, suggesting he understood predatory biology far better than his primitive appearance suggested. "Fascinating specimen," David commented cheerfully as he worked. "The exoskeleton design reminds me of arthropods from our homeworld, though significantly larger and more robust. Those tail stingers appear to be dual-chambered for different venom types. Am I correct in assuming one delivers paralytic compounds while the other provides necrotizing agents?" Professor Aldrich blinked in surprise at the human's sophisticated analysis. Few xenobiology students could identify Deathstalker venom systems so accurately, yet this newcomer species had deduced the information simply by observation. His scientific curiosity began overriding his shock at Nyx's unprecedented behavior. "You are remarkably perceptive, David," Aldrich replied while patting his still trembling pet reassuringly. "Indeed. The primary stinger contains neurotoxins that shut down nervous system function within seconds. The secondary stinger delivers enzymes that begin breaking down cellular structure for easier consumption. Most beings require extensive study to understand such complexities." David nodded thoughtfully and made additional notes in his primitive book. "We have similar predatory adaptations on Earth, though generally on smaller scales. Black widow spiders use neurotoxic compounds, while certain snake species employ hemotoxic agents that break down blood cells and tissue. The principle seems universal across biological systems." Every alien student in the lecture hall felt a collective chill at David's casual comparison. His homeworld apparently contained multiple creatures employing the same lethal adaptations that made Deathstalkers the galaxy's most feared predators. The humans spoke about these deadly beings the same way others might discuss household pets. Young Vera, a crystalline lithos student, in the front row pulsed with nervous orange light as she processed this information. "David, if I may ask, what classification do your species assign to these creatures you mentioned? Are they considered apex predators on your homeworld?" David laughed pleasantly, which somehow made his response even more unsettling. "Oh no, not at all. Spiders are quite small, really. Most no bigger than your thumb. Snakes vary in size, but even our largest species are nothing compared to what we consider true apex predators. Those would be creatures like polar bears, great white sharks, or saltwater crocodiles." The temperature in the lecture hall seemed to drop several degrees as students contemplated a world containing multiple predatory species, each apparently more dangerous than the creatures David had already mentioned. The fact that humans coexisted with such beings while evolving into the dominant species painted a picture that challenged everything they understood about biological hierarchies. Nix whimpered softly and pressed even closer against Professor Aldrich's legs as David continued describing Earth's fauna. The Deathstalker's enhanced chemical sensors were detecting something in the human's scent that triggered every survival instinct. The creature possessed millions of years of evolution had programmed Nix to recognize the signature of something far more dangerous than itself. "Your world sounds quite challenging," commented Rex, a hulking Mantari warrior whose own species prided themselves on combat prowess. "How do humans survive among so many predatory threats? Do you live in heavily fortified settlements or maintain constant military readiness?" David shook his head with another of those unsettling smiles. "Not really. We've learned to coexist mostly. Some people choose to live in cities where encounters are rare, but others prefer rural areas where they might regularly see bears, wolves, or venomous snakes. Many humans actually seek out interactions with dangerous wildlife as recreational activities." Dead silence greeted this revelation as alien minds struggled to process the concept of deliberately engaging dangerous predators for entertainment. The idea contradicted every known survival instinct across galactic civilization. No sane species voluntarily exposed themselves to lethal threats without overwhelming necessity. Professor Aldrich cleared his throat nervously as he felt Nix's claws tightening their grip on his robes. "David, when you say recreational activities, could you elaborate on what exactly humans consider entertaining regarding predatory encounters?" The human's eyes lit up with enthusiasm that made several students unconsciously lean away from his position. "Oh, there are so many options. Some people go shark cage diving where they get lowered into the ocean surrounded by hunting great whites. Others prefer free climbing, which means scaling vertical rock faces, hundreds of meters high without safety equipment. Then there's base jumping, where you leap from aircraft or cliff tops and deploy parachutes at the last possible moment." Each activity David described sounded like an elaborate suicide method to the alien students, yet he spoke about them with genuine excitement rather than horror. The casual way humans apparently risked death for entertainment suggested a relationship with mortality that bordered on incomprehensible. Dr. Marcus Webb, the Academy's senior xenopsychologist who had quietly entered during the discussion, stepped forward with obvious fascination. "David, I hope you don't mind additional questions, but this information is crucial for understanding your species. Could you explain why humans engage in these dangerous activities? What psychological drives motivate such behavior?" David paused thoughtfully before responding. "I think it comes down to how we define being alive. Our homeworld taught us that existence is inherently risky, so we learned to find meaning in facing challenges and overcoming them. The adrenaline rush from surviving dangerous situations makes us feel more connected to life itself. Some philosophers argue that without risk, there can be no real growth or achievement." The profound implications of David's explanation settled over the lecture hall like a heavy blanket. Humans hadn't just survived on a world filled with deadly predators. They had evolved to psychologically require danger and challenge as essential components of their existence. Their species had transformed survival necessity into recreational pursuit. Nix suddenly bolted from behind Professor Aldrich and scrambled toward the emergency exit ports as David shifted position in his chair. The massive predator that had never retreated from anything in its existence abandoned its handler completely, rather than remain in proximity to whatever primal force it sensed emanating from the deceptively harmless human. Emergency containment fields activated automatically as Nix fled toward the exit sensors, registering a massive biosignature in distress. Professor Aldrich rushed after his terrified companion, while David looked genuinely concerned about the disruption he had apparently caused. Security protocols engaged throughout the Academy, as staff attempted to understand why their most dangerous specimen had suddenly abandoned its handler. "I apologize if I've caused problems," David said earnestly as he rose from his seat. "Should I leave to avoid further distressing your animal? I certainly don't want to interfere with your educational demonstration." Dr. Webb studied the human with intense fascination, while Academy security teams scrambled to locate and secure the loose Deathstalker. David, I don't believe you understand the significance of what just occurred. Nix has been Professor Aldrich's companion for over 15 years. That creature has never shown fear aggression toward its handler or flight response under any circumstances. The implications hung heavy in the lecture hall air as students processed the unprecedented event. They had witnessed behavior that contradicted decades of established xenobiology research. Deathstalkers were supposedly incapable of experiencing terror. Yet Nix had demonstrated textbook panic responses triggered by nothing more than David's presence. Through the hall's observation windows, they could see Professor Aldrich attempting to coax Nix from where it had wedged itself between two storage containers in the corridor. The massive predator refused to emerge despite its handler's patient encouragements and offering of favorite treats. Its 8 eyes remained fixed on the doorway leading back to the lecture hall where David waited. Perhaps we should continue with alternative demonstration methods, suggested Dr. Webb, as he activated a holographic projector. David, since you appear knowledgeable about predatory biology, would you be willing to share information about apex predators from your homeworld? The comparative analysis could prove educational for our students. David nodded enthusiastically and moved toward the front of the hall, while alien students unconsciously shifted away from his path. The human seemed completely unaware of the subtle fear responses his presence triggered in beings from across the galaxy. Earth's predatory systems are quite diverse. David began as 3-dimensional images materialized above the projector. Our largest land predator is the polar bear, which can weigh over 700 kilograms and survive in temperatures that would freeze most life forms. Their primary hunting ground consists of shifting ice sheets where they pursue seals through holes in frozen oceans. The hologram displayed a massive white-furred creature with claws longer than most beings' fingers and teeth designed for crushing bone. Several Vraxian students clicked nervously as they observed the bear's muscular frame and obvious physical power. In our oceans, we have great white sharks which can reach lengths of 6 meters and detect electrical signatures from prey at considerable distances. David continued as the display shifted to show a torpedo-shaped predator with rows of serrated teeth. They've remained virtually unchanged for millions of years because their design achieved near-perfect efficiency for aquatic hunting. Student whispers filled the hall as they contemplated creatures that rivaled the size and apparent lethality of known galactic apex predators. Yet David spoke about these beings with the same casual tone others might use to describe interesting wildlife rather than existential threats. But perhaps most impressive are saltwater crocodiles, which can remain motionless for hours before striking with explosive force. The hologram now showed an armored reptilian form with jaws capable of generating tremendous crushing pressure. They're ambush predators that have survived since before mammals evolved on our world. Young Vera pulsed with bright yellow curiosity as she raised a crystalline appendage. David, you describe these creatures as though your species regularly encounters them. How do humans avoid becoming prey for such obviously dangerous predators? David's expression grew thoughtful as he considered the question. Well, we don't always avoid them. Some humans choose careers that require regular interaction with dangerous wildlife, like researchers, photographers, or conservation specialists. Others simply accept the risks as part of living in certain regions. My grandfather worked as a park ranger in areas where mountain lions, bears, and venomous snakes were common. The casual mention of venomous creatures triggered another wave of nervous energy through the assembled students. The humans' family members apparently chose professions that guaranteed exposure to lethal fauna rather than seeking safer alternatives. But surely your species developed advanced weapons or protective technologies to defend against such threats, pressed Rex the Mentari warrior, whose own people relied heavily on technological advantages in dangerous situations. David shook his head with that unsettling smile that was becoming familiar to the students. Some people carry basic tools for emergencies, but mostly we rely on understanding animal behavior and avoiding confrontations. Most predators don't actually want to fight humans unless they're protecting territory or offspring. We learn to coexist by respecting their space and understanding their patterns. Dr. Webb leaned forward with obvious fascination. David, are you suggesting that humans share territory with apex predators without technological barriers or constant military presence? Your species simply trusts in behavioral knowledge to prevent fatal encounters. For the most part? Yes, David replied. Though we do have some interesting exceptions, some humans actually seek out close encounters with dangerous predators as recreational activities like swimming with sharks or observing grizzly bears during salmon runs. There are entire tourism industries built around such experiences. The revelation that humans voluntarily entered the hunting grounds of apex predators for entertainment purposes left the alien students speechless. They were processing a species that had evolved beyond typical prey responses and developed psychological drives that actively sought dangerous situations. Professor Aldrich finally returned to the lecture hall looking exhausted and concerned. I apologize for the interruption, but Nix refuses to return while David remains present. The creature appears to be experiencing genuine terror response, which shouldn't be possible given its neurological structure. David looked genuinely distressed at this information. I'm truly sorry, Professor. Is there anything I can do to help? Perhaps if I explain to Nix that humans aren't actually threatening to non-aggressive species. The suggestion that a human could somehow communicate with and reassure a Deathstalker struck everyone as either remarkably naive or incredibly confident, given what they had witnessed of David's apparent effect on galactic apex predators. Academy emergency response teams had finally managed to coax Nix from its hiding position, though the Deathstalker required 3 handlers and chemical sedatives to approach the lecture hall safely. The massive predator remained docile during transport, but its 8 eyes never stopped scanning for potential escape routes as they brought it back toward where David waited. This behavior pattern contradicts everything we understand about Deathstalker psychology, Professor Aldrich explained as he reviewed bio-readings from his companion. Nix's stress hormones are elevated beyond anything in our research database. The creature is experiencing fight-or-flight responses that shouldn't exist in apex predators. Dr. Webb nodded grimly as he studied the data streams. Evolutionary biology suggests that only prey species develop such acute fear responses. Predators typically demonstrate aggression, territorial defense, or curiosity when encountering unknown threats. They don't exhibit submission behaviors unless facing something they recognize as a superior force in their ecological hierarchy. David listened to their analysis with growing concern, clearly troubled by his apparent effect on the Deathstalker. I don't understand why Nix would perceive me as threatening. I've never harmed any creature similar to your companion, and humans generally avoid conflicts with dangerous wildlife whenever possible. The human's confusion seemed genuine as he watched handlers carefully position Nix at the far end of the lecture platform while maintaining maximum distance from where he stood. The predator's entire muscular frame remained tense and ready for immediate flight, despite the sedatives coursing through its system. David, the issue may not be conscious threat assessment, Dr. Webb suggested thoughtfully. Evolution programs certain responses at deeper levels than rational thought. Nix might be detecting biological signatures that trigger instinctive recognition of something beyond its natural hierarchy. Young Vera pulsed with nervous orange frequencies as she processed the implications. Are you suggesting that humans evolved in an environment so dangerous that even galactic apex predators recognize them as superior threats? How could such circumstances produce a sapient species rather than extinction? David paused to consider the question while unconsciously rolling up his sleeves, revealing pale skin crossed with several thin scars that immediately caught alien attention. I suppose Earth demanded adaptability above all else. Our ancestors couldn't rely on size, speed, or natural weapons like claws or venom, so we developed intelligence, cooperation, and tool use to survive. The scars covering David's arms told a story of regular contact with hostile forces that would have been fatal for most galactic species, yet he displayed them casually as normal consequences of human existence. Each mark represented an encounter that should have resulted in death but had instead been survived and learned from. You mentioned cooperation, Rex observed with professional interest. How do humans organize against threats that overpower individual members? Do you maintain warrior castes or specialized military units like the Mantari battle clans? David laughed, which somehow made his response more unsettling. Not really, though some humans choose military careers. Most of us just work together when facing challenges like natural disasters, wild animal encounters, or extreme weather conditions. Everyone contributes whatever skills they possess, rather than relying on dedicated warrior classes. The casual dismissal of military specialization struck the warrior caste Mantari as either naive or indicative of a species where every individual possessed combat-relevant capabilities by necessity rather than choice. David, could you elaborate on these natural disasters you mentioned? Dr. Webb requested while making detailed notes. What types of environmental challenges require coordinated human responses? The human's expression grew thoughtful as he considered where to begin. Well, there are hurricanes with winds exceeding 300 kilometers per hour that can destroy entire cities, earthquakes that split the ground apart and topple buildings, volcanic eruptions that bury thousands of square kilometers under molten rock. Then there are tsunamis, which are basically walls of water 30 meters high, traveling at jet aircraft speeds. Each natural phenomenon David described sounded like planetary-scale weaponry deployed against his species. Yet humans had apparently survived and thrived despite regular exposure to such catastrophic events. The alien students struggled to comprehend a world where the environment itself functioned as a constant existential threat. Tornadoes are interesting too. David continued conversationally. They're rotating columns of air that can pick up entire buildings and throw them several kilometers. These storms can form with very little warning, so people in affected regions just accept that they might need to take shelter underground at any moment. Professor Aldrich felt Nix pressing against his legs again as the Deathstalker reacted to David's casual discussion of surviving regular encounters with forces that could destroy cities. The Predator seemed to understand somehow that this unassuming human represented something forged by circumstances beyond anything in galactic experience. How do humans psychologically cope with existing under such constant environmental threats? Dr. Webb asked with obvious fascination. Most species would develop severe anxiety disorders or retreat to protected underground settlements, David shrugged in that characteristically casual manner that was becoming familiar to the alien observers. I think we just learned to accept that existence involves risk, so we focus on enjoying life while we have it. Some philosophers argue that constant danger makes humans appreciate beauty, friendship, and achievement more intensely because we know everything is temporary. The profound philosophical implications of David's response settled over the lecture hall like a revelation. These beings hadn't just survived on a hostile world, they had developed psychological frameworks that transformed existential threat into motivation for living more fully. But surely human civilization has developed technologies to protect against such environmental hazards, Vera suggested hopefully. Advanced warning systems or energy barriers that deflect hurricanes and earthquakes. David shook his head with an expression that mixed amusement with resignation. We have early warning systems and building codes designed to reduce casualties, but you can't really fight hurricanes or volcanoes. We just evacuate when possible and rebuild afterward. It's part of the cycle of human existence. The matter-of-fact acceptance of rebuilding entire civilizations after regular destruction events left the alien students speechless. They were processing a species that treated planetary catastrophes as routine inconveniences rather than extinction-level threats. Dr. Webb activated additional recording systems as he realized they were documenting something unprecedented in galactic xenobiology. The casual revelations emerging from David's responses painted a picture of evolutionary pressures beyond anything previously encountered by civilized species. David, I hope you don't mind extensive questioning, but your homeworld appears to represent unique circumstances in our galactic database. Dr. Webb began carefully. Could you describe Earth's basic environmental parameters for our research records? David nodded agreeably as he settled back in his chair, seemingly unaware that every word was being analyzed by some of the galaxy's leading scientists. Earth is approximately 12,700 kilometers in diameter with gravity, roughly 9.8 meters per second squared. Our atmosphere is about 21% oxygen, 78% nitrogen, with trace amounts of other gases. Several alien students gasped audibly at these specifications. Earth's gravitational field was nearly double that of most inhabited worlds, while its oxygen concentration would be toxic to many galactic species. The combination suggested a world that should have been classified as uninhabitable rather than supporting complex civilization. The oxygen concentration seems quite high, Vera observed with nervous orange pulses. Most species require atmospheric processors to survive in such chemically aggressive environments. How do humans avoid cellular damage from oxygen toxicity? David looked puzzled by the question. I don't think we consider oxygen dangerous. Our entire biology depends on it for cellular respiration, though I suppose our blood does contain antioxidant compounds to prevent damage from free radicals. Maybe that's related to what you're asking about. The revelation that humans had evolved internal chemical defenses against their own atmospheric composition reinforced the emerging picture of a species forged by constant environmental hostility. What temperature ranges does your species consider habitable? Rex inquired while comparing his own thermal requirements to what he was hearing about Earth's conditions. Humans can survive from about minus 40 degrees Celsius to plus 50 degrees Celsius for extended periods, David replied thoughtfully. Though we're most comfortable between 10 and 30 degrees, some people choose to live in much more extreme conditions, like Arctic researchers who spend months at minus 60 degrees, or desert nomads who travel through regions exceeding 50 degrees regularly. The temperature range David described spanned conditions that would kill most galactic species within hours, yet humans apparently considered such extremes merely uncomfortable rather than lethal. The casual mention of people deliberately living in these hostile environments suggested psychological drives that prioritized exploration over safety. David, you mentioned desert nomads and Arctic researchers. Dr. Webb pressed with obvious fascination. Do humans regularly choose to inhabit the most dangerous regions of your homeworld rather than seeking more hospitable areas? David's expression brightened with enthusiasm. Oh, absolutely. Some of the most beautiful and interesting places on Earth are also the most challenging to survive in. Many humans are drawn to mountain peaks where the air is too thin to breathe comfortably, or deep ocean trenches where pressure would crush most materials. We've built research stations in Antarctica, where temperatures drop below minus 70 degrees, and established communities in tropical rainforests, where everything from insects to plants can kill you. Each location David described sounded like a carefully designed death trap. Yet humans apparently competed for opportunities to establish permanent settlements in such places. The psychological profile emerging from these revelations challenged fundamental assumptions about sapient behavior. Are these researchers and nomads specially trained military personnel or enhanced individuals? Professor Aldrich asked as he monitored Nix's continued stress responses to David's presence. Not usually, David replied with another of those unsettling casual smiles. Most are ordinary people who simply find extreme environments fascinating. Some are scientists studying climate or geology. Others are just adventurers who enjoy the challenge. Mountain climbing and polar exploration are popular recreational activities that attract people from all walks of life. The concept of ordinary civilians voluntarily exposing themselves to conditions that would challenge military specialists from warrior species struck every alien observer as fundamentally irrational. Yet David spoke about such activities as normal human behavior rather than exceptional courage or recklessness. David, I must ask about human recreational activities you mentioned earlier. Dr. Webb continued. Could you provide more details about these voluntary, dangerous pursuits? What psychological drives motivate such behavior? David paused to organize his thoughts while alien students leaned forward despite their instinctive wariness. Well, there are many different categories. Some people enjoy physical challenges like rock climbing, where you scale vertical cliff faces using only your hands and feet. Others prefer speed-based activities like motorcycle racing where participants travel at over 300 kilometers per hour around closed courses. The mention of humans voluntarily traveling at such velocities for entertainment purposes triggered nervous clicking from the Vraxian students who considered anything above 50 kilometers per hour dangerously reckless. Then, there are water sports like surfing where people ride ocean waves that can be 20 meters high, or whitewater rafting through rapids that could easily crush boats against rocks. David continued enthusiastically. Some humans prefer aerial activities, like skydiving or wingsuit flying where you leap from aircraft and glide through mountain valleys at extremely low altitudes. Each activity sounded like an elaborate suicide method disguised as entertainment, yet David's obvious enjoyment of the EOE subject matter suggested these were cherished cultural traditions rather than isolated acts of desperation. But perhaps most interesting are the endurance challenges, David added thoughtfully. Some humans attempt to cross entire continents on foot through deserts where water is scarce and temperatures extreme. Others swim across channels of freezing ocean water or climb mountain peaks where most people would lose consciousness from lack of oxygen. The systematic catalog of voluntary suffering David was describing painted a picture of psychological drives that seemed designed to seek out potentially fatal experiences. His species had apparently evolved beyond normal survival instincts into something that required constant testing against lethal odds. Nick suddenly bolted again, despite the sedatives, as David gestured enthusiastically while describing human recreational activities. The Deathstalker's chemical sensors were detecting something in the human's biochemistry that triggered every predatory warning system evolution had provided. Professor Aldrich watched his terrified companion flee and realized with growing certainty that Nix wasn't just afraid of David. The creature was recognizing the biological signature of something that had evolved to thrive in conditions that made galactic apex predators look fragile by comparison. Security teams had managed to corner Nix in a reinforced holding area, but the Deathstalker refused all attempts at calming. Despite Professor Aldrich's presence, the creature's bio-readings showed stress levels that should have been impossible for apex predators to experience. Its 8 eyes remained fixed on the corridors leading back toward the lecture hall where David waited. "I think we need to acknowledge what we're witnessing here," Dr. Webb announced to the assembled students and faculty. "This represents the first documented case of a galactic apex predator demonstrating submission behavior toward another sapient species. The implications for xenobiology and interspecies relations are unprecedented." David looked genuinely distressed by the situation as he observed the security feeds showing Nix's continued agitation. "Is there anything I can do to help your companion, Professor? I hate knowing that my presence is causing such distress to an obviously magnificent creature." The human's sincere concern for Nix's welfare, despite the creature's obvious terror, struck everyone as remarkably compassionate. Most species would have taken satisfaction in reducing a feared predator to cowering submission, yet David seemed primarily worried about the Deathstalker's psychological well-being. "David, I believe the issue extends beyond simple fear responses," Professor Aldrich explained thoughtfully. "Nix appears to be experiencing what we might call recognition behavior. The creature's instincts are identifying you as something that occupies a position in the natural hierarchy, far above its own." The implications of this statement settled over the lecture hall as students processed what their professor was suggesting. David didn't just represent a new species joining galactic civilization. He was a representative from a world that had produced beings capable of psychologically dominating creatures that terrorized the rest of the galaxy. "Perhaps we should attempt a controlled reintroduction," Dr. Webb suggested as he studied the bio-readings from Nix's holding area. "David, would you be willing to approach slowly while we monitor the creature's responses? If Nix recognizes you as a superior predator, it might display submission behaviors rather than continued flight." David nodded immediately despite the obvious risks involved. "Of course I'll do whatever might help Professor Aldrich's companion. Though I should mention that on Earth, when predators show submission to humans, it usually means they're acknowledging pack hierarchy rather than feeling threatened." The casual reference to humans as pack leaders for apex predators sent chills through the assembled aliens. They were beginning to understand that David's species hadn't just survived on a hostile world, they had somehow risen to dominate creatures that outclassed galactic civilization's most feared predators. The group moved carefully toward Nix's holding area, with David walking slightly ahead despite protests from security personnel. The humans' relaxed confidence in approaching a terrified Deathstalker struck everyone as either remarkably brave or completely insane. Through the reinforced observation windows, they could see Nix pressed against the far wall with all 8 legs braced for immediate flight. The creature's massive frame trembled visibly as David approached the containment barrier, but something remarkable began happening as the human drew closer. Instead of increased panic, Nix's trembling gradually subsided into a different type of tension. The Deathstalker's posture shifted from terror-driven flight preparation into something resembling wary respect. Its eyes remained fixed on David, but the dilated pupils began returning to normal. "Size fascinating," Dr. Webb whispered as he recorded the behavioral changes. "The creature appears to be transitioning from prey response to subordinate recognition. This suggests instinctual acknowledgement of hierarchical position rather than simple fear." David moved closer to the barrier while speaking in calm, reassuring tones. "Hello there, beautiful. I'm sorry I frightened you earlier. That wasn't my intention at all. You're obviously a magnificent predator, and I have tremendous respect for creatures like you." Nix's reaction to David's voice was extraordinary. The Deathstalker slowly lowered its head in a gesture that every xenobiology expert recognized as submission display among pack predators. The creature was offering deference to what its instincts had identified as an alpha presence. "David, I believe it's safe to enter the holding area if you're willing," Professor Aldrich suggested with obvious amazement. "Nix is displaying acceptance behaviors I've only read about in theoretical literature." The security systems disengaged as David stepped through the containment barrier, with movements that seemed completely natural. Despite the obvious danger, Nix remained motionless, except for slight trembling as the human approached slowly with one hand extended in what appeared to be a universal gesture of peaceful contact. "That's a good creature." David spoke softly as he drew within striking distance of claws that could tear through military armor. "I can see. You're a survivor just like humans are. You've earned your place at the top of your world's food chain, and that deserves respect. What happened next would be discussed in xenobiology circles for decades to come." Nix slowly extended its massive head toward David's outstretched hand and allowed the human to make contact with its armored skull. The Deathstalker's eyes closed partially in what could only be interpreted as acceptance or even contentment. "Incredible," Professor Aldrich breathed as he watched his lifetime companion submit to being petted by a creature it had initially fled from in terror. "Nix has never allowed physical contact from anyone except myself, and that took years of careful conditioning." David's touch seemed to have a calming effect on the Deathstalker, as visible tension drained from its muscular frame. The creature that had terrorized galactic civilization was now leaning into the contact like a domesticated pet, seeking affection from its owner. "You're just responding to instincts, aren't you?" David murmured as he gently stroked the creature's armored head. "Something in your evolutionary programming recognizes humans as pack leaders or territory holders. Your species probably evolved alongside something similar to us." Dr. Webb frantically recorded every detail of the interaction while formulating theories about what they were witnessing. "David, your hypothesis about evolutionary programming could explain the behavioral patterns we're observing. Nix might be recognizing biochemical signatures that indicate a species evolved to dominate apex predators." The implications extended far beyond simple academic interest. Every military strategist and diplomatic corps representative in the galaxy would need to reassess their understanding of humanity's position in the cosmic hierarchy. A species that could psychologically dominate Deathstalkers represented a force unlike anything previously encountered. "It's interesting how similar predatory behavior patterns are across different worlds," David observed as he continued his gentle interaction with Nix. "This submission display is almost identical to what we see in Earth predators when they encounter superior pack members. Physiological responses appear universal. Students and faculty watched in stunned silence as David casually discussed comparative predator psychology while hand-feeding treats to a creature that had been designed by evolution to kill anything. That moved his relaxed confidence suggested this type of interaction was normal, rather than extraordinary. David, how common are such interactions between humans and dangerous predators on your homeworld? Rex asked with professional curiosity tinged by obvious wariness. More common than you might expect. David replied as Nix began purring a low subsonic rumble that indicated deep contentment. Many humans work directly with apex predators as researchers, conservationists, or wildlife photographers. Some people even keep dangerous animals as companions, though that requires special permits and extensive training. The casual mention of humans voluntarily living with apex predators as household companions sent shocked whispers through the assembled. Aliens. They were processing revelations about a species that had not only survived among the galaxy's most dangerous life forms, but had somehow domesticated them. Professional wildlife handlers often develop close relationships with creatures that could easily kill them. David continued while scratching behind what appeared to be Nix's equivalent of ears. It requires understanding their psychology, respecting their capabilities, and establishing clear hierarchical boundaries. Most predators respond well to confident leadership. Professor Aldrich watched his terrified companion transform into a contented pet under David's ministrations, and realized that everything he understood about Deathstalker behavior had been fundamentally incomplete. Nix wasn't just calm, the creature was displaying joy. The key is projecting calm authority without threatening their territory or resources, David explained to his fascinated audience. Most predators aren't interested in unnecessary conflicts. They save their energy for hunting or defending against actual threats. Once they understand you're not competing with them directly, they often become quite cooperative. The matter-of-fact way David discussed managing relationships with apex predators painted a picture of psychological sophistication that challenged every assumption about human capabilities. This unassuming representative from Earth was demonstrating mastery over creatures that terrorized galactic civilization. As the demonstration continued, Nix began following David around the holding area like an eager pupil seeking approval from a respected teacher. The Deathstalker's entire demeanor had transformed from terror to what could only be described as worship. I believe we're witnessing the emergence of a new paradigm in interspecies relations, Dr. Webb announced to his recording systems. Humanity represents not just another addition to galactic civilization, but potentially a stabilizing force capable of managing the most dangerous elements of our shared ecosystem. David looked up from where he was now playing what appeared to be a game with Nix involving gentle mock combat that the Deathstalker was obviously enjoying. I hope humans can contribute positively to your galactic community. We've learned that cooperation usually produces better outcomes than conflict even with the most challenging species. As word spread throughout the Academy about the unprecedented events in Professor Aldrich's lecture hall, representatives from dozens of species began requesting immediate audiences with the human delegation. The galaxy had just discovered that their newest members might also be their most valuable allies in managing the cosmic frontier. The age of human integration into galactic civilization had begun, and the universe would never underestimate the quiet strength of Earth's children again.